And speaking of Senator Sanders, here he is. It's our Brunch with Bernie half hour today. Senator, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you with us. Did you want to share some thoughts with us about what's going on right now?
Let's just go through a few things, and we'll take some questions. I apologize for not having as much time as I would like. Yesterday morning, I was at a very interesting gathering with Martin Luther King III and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And the theme of the event was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the all-important Voting Rights Act, but also to make clear that we're going to do everything we can to fight the gutting of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court 2 years ago. And the issue that was raised by Martin Luther King III and other speakers and myself was that it is absolutely clear that as a result of the Supreme Court decision, states all over this country controlled by Republican governors and legislatures have moved aggressively to suppress the vote, to make it harder for people of color, for low-income people, for elderly people to participate in the political process. And it is so outrageous, so unspeakable, that it's almost hard to believe that people in the year 2014, 2015 could get away with trying to undermine American democracy. You know, what I have said many times, Tom, you know, I'm a politician. I run for office on many, many occasions, win most of the time, I've lost elections. It has never, ever occurred to me for 1 second to figure out a way to prevent people who may disagree with me from voting. You know, I run for office based on my ideas, try to convince people of what I'm saying, and if I don't, I don't. But the idea of trying to create a situation under the guise of voter fraud, to make it harder for poor people to participate, for them to get some voter ID that they need, or elderly people, is literally unthinkable. The result of all of this stuff is that it will be harder for people who are not sympathetic to the Republicans to participate in the political process. And at a time when our voter turnout is already among the lowest in the world, this is a major step backward. Add to that the fact that as a result of the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United, we now have a situation where billionaires are spending unlimited sums of money to purchase the candidates of their choice. When you look at all of that, what you're really seeing is a major attack on the foundations of American democracy. This is a huge, huge issue, and we have got to respond aggressively. What I have done just this last week is what many other countries more or less do, and that is to make voter registration automatic. If you're 18 years of age, everything being equal, you should be registered to vote, and hopefully you will get out to vote. But you should not have to climb over hurdles just to even be registered to vote. That's wrong. And the other point is that Election Day should be a national holiday. It should be a day where people have the time to consider whom they're voting for, consider the process, and in fact get out and vote. So that's an issue of huge concern to me. Let me just say a word about the Republican debate last night, which I saw. It seems to me that when you look at something like a debate on Fox, what is important is not just the answers that the candidates gave. Probably more importantly are the questions and the issues that Fox chooses not to even discuss. When you have virtually the entire scientific community telling us that climate change is the great global environmental crisis that we face, rather amazing to me, Fox did not have one question on climate change, perhaps to avoid the candidates' embarrassment of being folks who refuse to even acknowledge the reality of climate change. When you are looking at an attack, fundamental attack on democracy as a result of Citizens United Supreme Court decision, not one question about campaign finance and the propriety of most of the candidates up there having super PACs and raising substantial sums of money from the wealthy and large corporations. Not a question about what it means to American democracy where super PACs money coming from the very wealthy, have more money than even the candidates' own campaign funding capabilities. Not a question on that. Not a question on the great moral issue facing our economy, and that is the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. How do the candidates feel about the fact that the top 0.1% now own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%, and over half of all new income is going to the top 1%? Any thoughts about that? Our infrastructure is crumbling, and we need to create millions of jobs because real unemployment is about 10.4%. Not a question on that. So what interested me is not so much the answers, although the answers were pretty scary. It was the questions that Fox chooses not to ask. So those are some of the thoughts on my mind, Mike.
Great.
Tom.
Okay. We pick up some phone calls. Okay. Corky in Hilton, New York. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Oh, hello, Senator Sanders. Stay healthy, okay?
Okay.
Listen, what I heard last night was I heard a debate on who's going to get us into war the fastest. I didn't hear anything about middle-class income. I didn't hear anything about student loan debt. I didn't hear anything about infrastructure, all the things you said. These people were just there to tout the drums of war to see who can satisfy the military corporate complex.
Well, I think Corky makes a very, very important point. You know, Tom and Corky, it amazes me very much how little some of my Republican colleagues have learned from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think as many of the listeners who at least have some short-term memory can recall what President Bush, Vice President Cheney, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, the whole crew of these people were telling us, hey, a war in Iraq, not a problem. We'll go in there. We'll get rid of Saddam Hussein. We'll establish a democracy. Our troops will come home with minimal loss. We'll move to democracy throughout the Middle East. Well, it didn't quite happen like that. And I think Corky's point is very right on, very well spoken. And that is, it seems to me, that these guys who are so quick to attack the president's effort to negotiate an agreement with Iran to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, well, it's not a perfect agreement. Well, I'm sure it's not. And what's their alternative? Is it another war? Is it perpetual war in the Middle East? So I think Corky picked up on a very important point, is how quick these guys are to push aside, to dismiss serious efforts trying to negotiate an agreement rather than go to war. War should be the very, very, very last option. We should exhaust all other approaches before we go to war, but that did not seem to be the case with the Republican candidates.
Jennifer in Sacramento. We have 2 minutes to the break. Jennifer, you're on the air. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Bernie and Tom. I am so excited to talk to you. I have joined a group here in Sacramento for Bernie, and last night we weren't watching the debate. We were focusing on getting Bernie elected for president. But one of the questions our group was having is how do we best communicate and coordinate with your national campaign so that we're all on the same page? And also we want to know, when are you coming to Sacramento?
Well, as Tom mentioned, Jennifer, at the beginning of the show, I'm going to be on the West Coast. I'm taking a plane tonight. We'll be in Seattle, then we're going to Portland, then we're going to L.A. We're going to make a brief stop in Oakland, I believe, for a little bit on Monday. So I will be out in California, not in Sacramento. Go to my website, berniesanders.com. What we are looking at and the way the campaign will, I think, function most effectively is with a lot of grassroots initiative. You in Sacramento know California, the issues, how you go forward a lot better, frankly, than we do. So take a lot of leeway, but you have to coordinate, obviously, with the national campaign. We will have some people on payroll in California in the not-too-distant future, and all those people who are part of the campaign, who have indicated support for the campaign in California, will learn about how they can best coordinate.
Yeah. In the quarter minute we have left, your thoughts on the lack of coverage of the biggest political event in the history of America, 100,000 people showing up for your house parties.
Well, Tom, I think the way we do things is outside of the corporate media's framework. And it does not surprise me. I think they are not of the understanding that you can win an election through small campaign contributions. We now have over 350,000 individual contributions, but you know what? They average something like $31 a piece. This is not significant to the media, who pays a lot of attention to the super PACs and the millionaires and the billionaires
You're listening
who run
to
elections.
Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with Senator Bernie Sanders. It's our Brunch with Bernie half hour today. Stick around. And welcome back. If somebody in the Senate recording studio is driving down our audio back to Bernie, please don't, because I think he didn't hear the bumper. Senator, you're still here with us?
Yep, right here.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Free Speech TV caller. Here we go. Farrell in Sacramento. Another Sacramento call. Interesting. Watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Senator Sanders. Yes. Here in Sacramento, we do have a lot of progressives, and I just want to state one thing, that I am one of Carly Fiorina's 30,000 victims relative to her layoff scheme at HP. But what I did want to mention was that I was hoping that you would showcase in greater form your civil rights bona fides. I understand that you are a longtime civil rights leader, and I think that you could do more of that within your campaign and your website information. Thank you.
Good. You're absolutely right, Farrell. All I would ask is that people understand we have been in this race for a little over 3 months. That's it. And the campaign, in fact, is far going further than our infrastructure. We're trying to catch up with what's happening all over this country. We kind of didn't anticipate the kind of support and the kind of numbers that we're having. I think our website is good, but it is not as strongly updated as it should be on a number of issues. In terms of civil rights, you're right. This has been a passion of mine throughout my entire life. I think if you check my record, it is one of the strongest civil rights records in the United States Congress. Over the last 25 years and even before that. The issue, it seems to me, when we deal with civil rights is two-pronged, and we got to go forward simultaneously in both areas. I don't have to go into great length about the disgust of the American people, the African-American community, over issues like Sandra Bland or Michael Brown or Samuel DuBose, people who died for no particular reason, who were unarmed, who would not have died if they were white. This is a profound issue that has got to be addressed through serious police reform, through community policing, through use of force issues. And this whole issue of the incarceration of so many people in this country, so that we have more people in jail than any other nation, and disproportionately minorities, African Americans and Hispanics, is an issue that must be addressed. Simultaneously, though, we also have to, as Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us in his march on Washington in 1963, that was a march for, Tom, you remember what the title of that march was?
I don't.
It was
a poor people's
jobs.
march. I'm sorry.
It was jobs and freedom.
Jobs and freedom. Thank you.
Because he understood that it was absolutely imperative to create a strong economy for the American people and for African Americans as well. Right now, today, and we have over 50% of young African Americans between the age of 17 and 20 who are high school graduates who are either unemployed or underemployed. The gap between incomes of whites and blacks is growing wider. This is an issue that must be dealt with. We've got to go forward in both areas.
There you go. We'll be right back with Senator Bernie Sanders. It's our Brunch with Bernie half hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. Ten minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie half hour today here on the Thom Hartmann Program, and Senator Sanders on the line with us. Peter in St. Petersburg, Florida. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator Sanders. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, Peter. Thanks.
Senator Sanders, I want you to know that I'm older than you are, and I used to vote for the Republicans all my life. And 2 weeks ago, I switched over to the Democratic Party just so I can vote for you, sir.
Peter, I appreciate that very, very much. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I would just like to say that one thing, sir, I hope you start to bring up in your speeches, which are marvelous, and that is for people to be sure to vote in primaries. Because if you do not win the primaries, it's all over, I think, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely correct. Good point. Well, let me just pick up on what Peter said. Obviously, the very great importance of the primary and caucus process and the need to see widespread involvement in those processes. But the fact that Peter was, until a couple of weeks ago, a Republican and is now supportive of my candidacy, I think is something that is happening in large numbers, to be honest with you. I think many Republicans are catching on that while they may have differences of opinion and disagreements with me on this or that issue, that if you are a working class or a middle class Republican, your interests are not the same as the Koch brothers or other billionaires. Most working class and middle class Republicans do not think it is a good idea to give huge tax breaks to billionaires, which is essentially what every Republican candidate was talking about last night on their debate. Most Republicans who don't have a lot of money do not think it's a great idea to cut Social Security or to cut Medicare or to cut veterans programs or to cut Medicaid. So I think to the degree that we continue to raise issues that resonate with Americans across the political spectrum, to the degree that we bring people together, this campaign is going to do very, very well. And I thank Peter for his support.
Audrey in Richton Park, Illinois. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning. I was calling to ask regarding the issue of voting rights and voting process. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Regarding the voting process for those who are active duty military, you're talking about the necessity, the importance of the vote. Well, when it comes to a lot of times these elections are held, the active duty service members are not stationed anywhere near their homes of record, where their voting districts. So they have to either vote by mail or whatever process. A lot of times they don't even know how they can vote, how they can participate in the election. They just know, okay, they're supposed to vote, but when, where, whatever. How can we make the election process easier for active duty military personnel? I mean, I'm a veteran of the Army. My son's in the Air Force. I nag him about getting a ballot, a paper ballot, so he can mail it back in, an absentee ballot. How can we make this process easier for active duty military personnel?
Audrey, great question. And if there is any group of people who we want to be voting, who have the right to vote, for whom we should make it as easy as possible, it is obviously the men and women who are putting their lives on to defend this country, people who are often out of the United States of America. I think we do a couple of things, and thank you for mentioning that. Number one, we make it clear to the Department of Defense that they, in fact, inform and make it very clear to the men and women in the armed services how they can participate in the political process, making sure they get ballots out to those people as early as possible, not late, so they have the time to send those ballots back into their home states. So I think we got to educate. We got to make sure that the Department of Defense is doing exactly the right thing to make it as easy as possible for people who are abroad to participate in the political process. Audrey, thanks you very much for you and your family's service to our country.
Let's see here. George in Chicago. Hey, George. Please try and keep it quick.
Okay. I'd like to thank both the Senator and Audrey for raising the point about veterans and active service personnel, because one of the most despicable acts in recent times by the Republican Party was to engage in voter caging of active duty military personnel, sending registered letters to their home addresses, particularly in Ohio in 2004. And when the letters came back, they were removed from the voter rolls, and if their absentee ballots came in from abroad, they were discarded. Veterans and active duty people need to be reminded of that. Yeah. My main question, Senator, is I was disappointed to hear that Chuck Schumer announced his opposition to the agreement with Iran. I'd like to know what your reaction is to that and when you will announce your position on the issue.
Well, funny that you should ask that, George, because I expect to be speaking to the president within the next hour or two. Some questions I would like to have answered. But let me just say this at this point. As I mentioned a moment ago earlier on the show, I find it really amazing to what degree the Republican candidates yesterday apparently forgot about the consequences of the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, and for all intent and purposes, seem hell-bent to wanting to getting us involved in another war with Iran. I believe that the President, Secretary Kerry, have worked as hard as they could, and it's not just a United States initiative. You know, you're dealing with Russia, with China, with France, with Germany, with the UK, trying to bring people together to figure out a way in which we can prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Is any agreement going to be perfect? It is not. So I've got a few questions that I want answered, but George, I think you'll hear a statement from me in the not very distant future.
Okay. And Senator, we just have 5 seconds left. It's really not even enough for a comment other than to thank you so much for being with us today and for the great work you're doing. Your message is traveling so far and wide. We're so honored to be part of what you're doing and to have you on this program. Thank you, sir.
Tom, it is great to have done this program with you for so many years. Keep up the great work.
I will do my very best. I look forward. I hope we can see you next week.